70 men worked for 3 straight days without stopping to sleep or eat. They dragged chests from one ship to another until their shoulders bled through their shirts and their hands trembled too badly to hold the ropes properly. Silver bars, gold coins, pearls sealed inside greasy leather bags, Colombian emeralds still uncut, raw green stones the size of pigeon eggs. Captain Francis Drake stood on the stern castle of the Golden Hind and stared down into the hold of the captured Spanish galleon Nuestra Señora de la Concepción, better known to history as Cacafuego. The hold looked bottomless. They emptied it like men scooping water from a well, yet the treasure never seemed to end. By the 3rd day, some sailors simply collapsed between the chests and fell asleep directly on the deck. Others kicked them awake because the work had to be finished before dawn. Another Spanish ship could appear at any moment. It was March of 1579. Drake had just captured the richest prize in the history of English seafaring, and his crew physically could not carry the wealth away fast enough. Now imagine another scene, same century, same ocean. A pirate sloop closes in on a Spanish treasure galleon. 40 men crowd the deck while boarding hooks swing from their hands, pistols loaded, cutlasses ready. The captain screams the order to attack. 20 minutes later, the pirate vessel is shattered into floating wreckage. Nobody reaches the Spanish deck. Nobody touches the treasure. The sea closes over what remains of the attackers. Those two scenes represent the reality of hunting Spanish galleons, one miraculous success for every mountain of failed attacks that nobody remembers. The Spanish galleon was not just a ship, it was a floating fortress built for a single purpose: move silver across the Atlantic and kill anyone who tried to steal it. The largest galleons displaced nearly 2,000 tons. Most pirate vessels weighed 10 times less. A major Spanish treasure ship carried 50 to 60 heavy guns. Pirates often sailed with 10 or 12 cannons, sometimes 20 if they were unusually well armed. The crew difference was even worse. A Spanish galleon could carry 400 to 600 men, including trained Marines and professional gunners. A pirate captain might command 100 men total, including cooks, drunks, boys, carpenters, and wounded sailors barely capable of standing in battle. But the most terrifying thing about a galleon was the hull itself. Research conducted on the wreck of Nuestra Señora de Atocha, recovered near the Florida Keys centuries later, revealed hull sections nearly 60 centimeters thick in critical areas. Massive tropical hardwoods, oak and teak, cured for years before construction. A standard pirate 6-pound cannonball often failed to penetrate those walls. Even 12-pound shot sometimes buried itself uselessly in the timber without punching through. That means a pirate captain could close the distance, unleash every cannon he possessed, and watch the iron balls bounce away or disappear harmlessly into the wood, while the Spanish ship kept moving forward untouched. Movies usually show the opposite. Pirates fire once, and the treasure ship erupts in flames. Spaniards panic. Boarding parties swing onto the deck while heroic music plays. Reality was uglier. In reality, pirates approached a galleon and quickly understood that cannon fire alone would not destroy it. That left only one option: boarding. And boarding was slaughter. The stern castle of a Spanish galleon towered 4 or 5 meters above the main deck. When attackers climbed upward using ropes and grappling hooks, they entered what modern soldiers would call a perfect elevated kill zone. Spanish Marines fired muskets downward from protected positions. Grenades rained from above. Small swivel guns packed with grape shot, broken glass, nails, and scrap iron blasted the attackers at point-blank range. Every major galleon carried dedicated naval grenadiers whose only task was turning enemy decks into hell. Spanish military records from the 17th century list them as separate specialists with separate pay. Imagine climbing a wet rope with a cutlass between your teeth while smoke blinds your eyes and your palms burn against the rigging. Then you look up and see a black iron grenade falling directly towards your face, fuse hissing in the dark. you cannot dodge. Below you is the ocean. Above you is a wall of timber soaked in smoke, blood, and seawater, and more grenades are already falling behind the first one. Historian David Cordingley estimated that pirate casualties during a full assault against an armed Spanish galleon could reach 70 or even 80%. Other historians, including Marcus Rediker, argued for lower numbers, closer to 40%. But Rediker added an important detail. Most pirates refused to attack once they realized the galleon was prepared to fight. That means even those casualty figures only apply to the crews reckless enough to continue the assault. Many pirate captains simply turned around after spotting a ready Spanish warship. No battle, no glory, no treasure, just survival. English Admiralty court records from the early 18th century showed the same pattern. Out of thousands of documented pirate attacks during the golden age of piracy,
only a tiny percentage targeted heavily armed treasure ships. Most pirate crews hunted merchant sloops, fishing vessels, isolated cargo ships, or weak coastal traders that could barely defend themselves. Bartholomew Roberts captured more than 400 ships during his career, making him one of the most successful pirates in history. Yet not one of those prizes was a full Spanish silver galleon. Roberts was ruthless, but he was not suicidal. He preferred profitable targets with manageable risks. So why attack galleons at all? Because one successful capture could make a crew richer than entire kingdoms. A heavily loaded treasure galleon might carry 500,000 silver pesos or more. That amount rivaled the yearly budget of a European state, not a town, not a province, a kingdom. One successful pirate captain could retire for life. An entire crew could establish its own miniature state somewhere in Madagascar or the Caribbean and live like kings, surrounded by stolen silver. The greatest example came in 1743 when British Commodore George Anson captured the Manila galleon Nuestra Señora de Covadonga. The ship carried more than 1.3 million silver pesos, along with massive quantities of refined silver. Contemporary British records valued the prize at a fortune equivalent to hundreds of millions of dollars today. When the treasure entered London, crowds gathered in the streets to watch 32 wagons transport the silver under armed escort, while sailors marched beside the cargo. It looked less like loot and more like the treasury of an empire. But the larger pattern matters more than the famous success stories. The Manila galleon route between Acapulco and Manila operated for roughly 250 years. During all that time, successful captures of the great treasure ships remained astonishingly rare. Thomas Cavendish captured Santa Ana in 1587. Woodes Rogers succeeded in 1709. George Shelvocke achieved a partial success in 1721. Anson captured Covadonga in 1743. That is roughly one major success every 60 years. Entire generations of pirates spent their lives hunting Manila treasure ships without ever seeing a single silver coin from them. And all four successful commanders had one thing in common. They were not independent pirates. They operated with government support, military crews, official funding, and legal protection under privateering commissions. These were state-backed operations disguised as piracy. Even the famous capture of Santa Ana by Cavendish depended heavily on luck. According to surviving journals, the Spanish ship had unloaded much of its artillery earlier in order to make room for additional cargo. The treasure vessel was dangerously underarmed when the English attacked. Had the guns remained on board, Cavendish himself might have disappeared beneath the Pacific. The Spanish treasure fleet system, known as the Flota de Indias, operated for more than 2 centuries. Twice a year, enormous convoys carried silver, gold, emeralds, spices, and colonial goods across the Atlantic under military escort. One fleet sailed toward Veracruz in Mexico. Another moved through Nombre de Dios and later Portobello in Panama. The convoys wintered separately, traded local goods, then reunited in Havana before crossing the ocean together under the protection of armed escort squadrons. Spain understood perfectly what these fleets represented. The Silver Mountain of Potosí in modern Bolivia produced an enormous share of the world's silver supply for generations. Spanish treasure funded Habsburg armies, European wars, royal construction projects, and the survival of the empire itself. Losing even one major convoy could trigger financial catastrophe. That is why every treasure galleon carried a royal officer known as the Maestre de Plata, the Master of Silver. He answered directly to the crown and carried one terrifying responsibility. If capture became inevitable, he was expected to sink the treasure before surrendering the ship. Even if pirates won the battle, they might still lose the prize. Spanish royal doctrine placed the cargo above everything else. Kings ordered their captains to avoid battle whenever escape remained possible. A captain who fled from pirates and saved the treasure received praise from the crown. A captain who fought bravely but lost the cargo could still face investigation or punishment. To the Spanish monarchy, treasure mattered more than honor. Pirates understood this and tried to exploit moments when the heavy galleons became vulnerable. Calm weather was one of the few opportunities. In dead wind, the enormous treasure ships lost speed and maneuverability. Their towering hulls became slow-moving targets trapped on flat water. But even then, success was rare. Spanish crews prepared for boarding long before attackers came close. Anti-boarding nets were stretched across the decks. Small swivel guns were loaded with grape shot and scrap metal. Marines armed with muskets occupied elevated firing positions along the stern castle and upper rails. And hidden inside that system was another grim detail people rarely remember.
Children worked aboard the galleons. Boys between 8 and 14 years old carried powder charges from the magazine to the gun decks during battle. They hauled water buckets to extinguish fires. They ran through smoke carrying tools and ammunition while cannonballs smashed into the hull around them. During serious engagements, casualty rates among these boys could become horrifyingly high. Historical investigations into naval battles of the period describe children running between heavy guns while splinters, iron fragments, and burning debris filled the air. Adult gunners could not fire and transport powder at the same time, so children became part of the machinery of war. A major galleon carried 60 or 70 cannons spread across multiple decks. The lowest gun deck mounted the heaviest weapons, culverins and demi-culverins, capable of firing 12-pound iron shot hundreds of meters with deadly accuracy. Middle decks carried medium artillery, while upper decks and towers mounted lighter anti-personnel weapons designed specifically to break boarding attacks. The great bronze culverins themselves were engineering masterpieces. Some weighed nearly 2 tons. Every cannon was cast individually using clay cores and sand molds. Each weapon carried foundry marks, royal crests, inscriptions, and decorative engravings identifying the workshop and year of production. Many even had names. When marine archaeologists recover these cannons centuries later, the markings often allow historians to identify not only the ship itself, but the exact foundry that produced the weapon. Spanish and English naval tactics differed fundamentally. Spanish commanders favored overwhelming broadside attacks. Entire gun decks fired simultaneously in a single concentrated blast designed to cripple an enemy ship instantly. 60 cannons discharging together could turn wooden hulls into storms of shattered timber and flying iron. but English captains preferred sustained fire. Instead of waiting for synchronized volleys, they allowed individual gun crews to reload and fire independently, creating constant pressure and continuous cannon fire. Even highly trained crews required 2 or 3 minutes to reload a heavy naval cannon. In close combat, a galleon might only manage 1 or 2 truly effective broadsides before ships collided together in smoke and chaos. But there was another enemy at sea, deadlier than pirates, storms, or cannon fire combined: scurvy. Vitamin C deficiency destroyed the human body slowly and methodically. Gums bled constantly, teeth loosened and fell out, old wounds reopened as though the body forgot how to heal itself, legs blackened, flesh rotted while the victim remained alive. On the Manila route, voyages could last 6 months without reaching land. A ship that departed with 400 crewmen might arrive with 300, sometimes 200, sometimes barely 100 survivors remained capable of work. Bodies were thrown overboard regularly after morning inspections. By the time pirates intercepted some galleons near California or the Pacific coast, the Spanish crews themselves often looked worse than the pirates hunting them. Men stood beside the cannons with swollen gums, rotting legs, and exhausted faces hollowed by disease. Some could barely lift equipment. Those moments created the rare opportunities pirates needed. In 1709, Woodes Rogers attacked the Manila galleon Nuestra Señora de la Encarnación y Desengaño after disease had already devastated much of the crew. Pirates hunted weakness whenever they could find it. But weakness had to be guessed correctly. Attacking a healthy, fully armed Spanish treasure ship with an experienced crew usually meant death. The history of the Spanish galleons is filled with mysteries that remain unsolved centuries later. Some ships simply vanished, others exploded without warning. Entire crews disappeared beneath the ocean, carrying fortunes large enough to finance kingdoms. On September 17, 1588, the galleon Santa Maria della Rosa sank in calm water near the coast of Ireland during the retreat of the Spanish Armada. There was no major storm at that moment, no battle, no obvious explanation. Nearly 400 people disappeared with the ship in only a few minutes. Survivors from nearby vessels later claimed the galleon simply rolled and vanished beneath the surface, as if something inside the hull had suddenly failed. Historians still debate the cause. One theory suggests an internal gunpowder explosion. Another proposes catastrophic structural damage suffered earlier during the Atlantic crossing. Others blamed sabotage or navigational errors. Nobody knows for certain. An even more famous disaster occurred on June 8, 1708, off the coast of modern Colombia. During battle with British forces commanded by Charles Wager, the Spanish treasure galleon San José suddenly exploded. The entire ship vanished in fire. Nearly 600 sailors, soldiers, passengers, and officers died together with one of the largest treasure cargoes ever assembled in the Americas. Modern estimates place the value of the lost cargo in the billions of dollars. No survivors remained to explain what caused the blast. The wreck stayed hidden until 2015. Even now, legal battles continue between governments and salvage interests over ownership of the treasure. Legends surrounded the treasure fleets almost immediately. Sailors whispered about sealed compartments hidden below false floors and inside the keel itself.
According to some accounts, Spanish officers concealed especially valuable cargo inside wax-lined cavities covered with ballast stones so that ordinary inspections would never discover them. Some underwater discoveries suggest these stories were not entirely fantasy. Archaeologists have found strange hidden spaces within certain wrecks, though historians believe many were probably used for smuggling private cargo rather than official royal treasure. Still, the legend survived because every treasure hunter dreams of discovering a sealed compartment untouched for centuries. Another fear haunted sailors across the Caribbean and Pacific: shipworm. Teredo nivalis, the so-called naval shipworm, was not a worm at all, but a wood-boring mollusk capable of destroying entire ships from below the waterline. A badly protected hull left too long in tropical waters could become riddled with tunnels within a year. The lower sections of some galleons resembled honeycombs after prolonged exposure. To fight the infestation, Spanish shipbuilders covered the lower hulls with protective lead and later copper sheathing. Pirates understood the danger as well. If a treasure ship spent too much time anchored in warm Caribbean ports without maintenance, its hull might already be dangerously weakened before battle even began. Sometimes a pirate captain only needed to follow such a ship and wait for the sea itself to destroy it. Everything about the galleons reflected siege mentality and paranoia. Hulls were designed to resist boarding. Smooth protective sheathing often caused grappling hooks to slide away without catching properly. Pirates threw hooks repeatedly, while musket fire, boiling water, grenades, and cannon blasts rained down from above. Even inside the ships, the design reflected brutal mathematics. Spanish naval architects intentionally spaced gun crews farther apart along the decks. The reasoning was cold and practical. If an enemy cannonball penetrated the hull, it would kill fewer men if they were not standing close together. Death management became part of naval architecture. The hulls themselves required endless maintenance. Crews constantly repaired seams using oakum, fibers pulled from old rope and hammered into gaps before sealing them with hot tar. A properly caulked galleon could remain remarkably watertight, but the movement of the ship continuously loosened the seals. Entire teams of carpenters moved through the vessel, performing repairs almost constantly. During battle, cannon impacts shook the hull violently enough to crack the caulking in dozens of places simultaneously. Leaks appeared throughout the ship while sailors fought above deck, surrounded by smoke and blood. Many legends claimed the Spanish crown issued secret orders commanding captains to sink their ships rather than surrender treasure alive. Historians have never found direct proof of such royal decrees, but the rumor appeared repeatedly in pirate memoirs and sailor accounts across the 17th century. Whether true or not, the existence of the rumor itself reveals how people viewed the treasure fleets, not as merchant ships, but vaults guarded by men expected to die before surrendering their cargo. Fear and superstition shaped life aboard the treasure fleets just as much as cannon fire and storms. Spanish sailors believed that every galleon carried one doomed man, a sailor marked by fate who would certainly die before the voyage ended. Before departure, crews sometimes tried to guess who it would be. Men suspected of carrying bad luck were quietly avoided. Sailors marked their chests or hammocks so they would not sleep beside them or share meals at the same table. They feared death could spread from one man to another like disease. Several Spanish memoirs from the 17th century mention these beliefs directly, including writings attributed to Captain Diego Flores Valdez. Whether sailors truly believed the curse or simply used it to cope with constant death is impossible to know, but the superstition itself reveals the psychological atmosphere aboard the fleets. Everyone understood that many of them would never return home. Francis Drake became a figure of near supernatural terror among Spanish sailors. Rumors spread through ports and fleets, claiming Drake possessed a magical mirror capable of revealing the position of Spanish treasure ships across hundreds of miles of ocean. Whenever he appeared suddenly near vulnerable convoys, frightened crews whispered that witchcraft guided him. The reality was less mystical, but far more effective. Drake built one of the best intelligence networks of his era. He interrogated captured sailors, bribed dock workers, recruited spies inside colonial ports, and paid indigenous and African laborers for information about treasure movements. But Drake never rushed to destroy the myth. Fear itself became one more weapon. Captains who believed they were being hunted by supernatural forces often made terrible decisions. Drake's famous capture of Nuestra Señora de la Concepción in 1579 became legendary across Europe. Contemporary reports describe English sailors working for days to transfer silver, gold, jewels, and valuables from the Spanish hold into their own ship. Some English accounts later claimed the profits from Drake's expedition helped reduce England's national debt and financed investments connected to the future expansion of English overseas trade. The exact value remains uncertain because many official records were deliberately hidden or destroyed. Queen Elizabeth I did not want Spain learning the true scale of the treasure that reached England. Then came the hurricanes. On July 22, 1622, a powerful storm shattered part of the Spanish treasure fleet near the Florida Keys. Among the ships lost was Nuestra Señora de Atocha, carrying enormous quantities of silver, gold, emeralds, and jewelry. More than 200 sailors died. Only a handful survived.
Spain searched for the wreck for decades. Divers, maps, eyewitness testimony, and repeated salvage expeditions failed to recover the main treasure. In one cruel twist of fate, another hurricane later destroyed part of the rescue effort itself. The sea seemed determined to keep what it had taken. Centuries later, American treasure hunter Mel Fisher dedicated 16 years to searching for Atocha. The obsession ruined him financially several times. His son died during the operation when one of the search vessels sank. Yet Fisher continued searching until 1985, when his team finally located the primary wreck site. Even then, not every chest listed in the original cargo manifests was recovered. Some treasure still lies somewhere beneath the Atlantic sand. The disaster repeated itself again in 1715 when another Spanish treasure fleet encountered a hurricane near Florida. 11 ships sank. Silver coins and artifacts from that fleet continue washing onto beaches centuries later after major storms disturb the seabed. Along the Florida coast, local treasure hunters still walk the sand after hurricanes, hoping the ocean has revealed another piece of the lost fleet. In the end, the age of the Spanish galleon did not die because of pirates. The galleons survived piracy itself by generations. What finally destroyed them was technology. Faster frigates, more maneuverable warships, new naval tactics, cheaper and more efficient shipbuilding methods developed by England and the Dutch Republic. By the early 19th century, the towering treasure galleon had become obsolete. The final Manila galleon sailed in 1815. But the ocean still keeps their graves. Marine archaeologists estimate that hundreds, possibly thousands of Spanish wrecks remain undiscovered beneath the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. Some disappeared in storms, others exploded in battle, many simply vanished without explanation. And somewhere in that darkness beneath the waves, sealed chests filled with silver from Potosi and emeralds from Colombia still wait beside the bones of the men who died protecting them.